Yes, the boys and the girls, the guys and the gals. Moor Street, there was a pub down here called the Woolpack. I think it got knocked down in 1950, but it was the scene of an incredible murder. Yeah, anyway, let's get into it, guys.
In October of 1847 on Moor Street in Birmingham, just after 10:30 in the morning, the people along that street were suddenly disturbed by the cries of murder. Police officers who were already nearby ran straight to the scene, and what they found in the backyard was described at the time as a frightening spectacle, with Mary Davies lying in the gutter and her throat cut from ear to ear, while her shithouse husband Matthew Davies stood nearby in the doorway, completely unconcerned. In the months leading up to that morning, it's said that the couple had been living on very unhappy terms, and that Matthew Davies had been in the habit of ill-treating his wife, with his temper becoming so severe that only in the days before the killing she'd been forced to seek the protection of the magistrates, resulting in a warrant being issued against him and a requirement for him to appear before the court. On the morning of the attack, he'd been expected to answer that charge. Instead, what unfolded inside that house began with a conversation that on the surface appeared almost ordinary. Mary Davies was in the back kitchen with another woman, preparing food while her husband spoke to her, urging her not to go through with the legal proceedings against him, attempting to persuade her to abandon the case and avoid appearing before the magistrates. She refused and said, "If God allows me, I'll be there." Despite his repeated pleas and despite the fact that he'd been drinking heavily the night before, although appearing more subdued that morning, he could not change her mind. And while this conversation continued, he moved away and sharpened a common table knife, doing so multiple times, all while remaining in the same space as his wife. There was no immediate struggle and no raised alarm at that point, nothing to suggest how quickly the situation was about to turn. Witnesses described how he moved towards Mary Davies as though he were about to kiss her, placing his arms around her neck in a familiar gesture, something that had been seen before and did not at first seem unusual. But in the same motion he drew the knife across her throat, cutting deeply enough to sever vital vessels, in what would later be described as a wound running from ear to ear. Mary Davies attempted to pull away, bringing a handkerchief up to her throat, and with what was described as a desperate effort, she managed to break free from him and move out onto the yard. But within moments she collapsed, falling near the doorway, where she would later be found lying in the gutter. From the moment the injury was inflicted to the point where she died, only a matter of minutes passed. Witnesses raised the alarm immediately, calling out that a murder had taken place, and people quickly began to gather while a surgeon was called to the scene. But there was nothing that could be done, as the wound had cut through both the jugular vein and the windpipe, making it almost instantly fatal. And throughout all of this, Matthew Davies remained at the scene. He didn't attempt to flee and he didn't show panic. He didn't react in any visible way to what had just happened, instead standing there with his hands in his pockets, appearing calm and unaffected even as others rushed around him. When police arrived, he was taken into custody without resistance, and the knife he used in the attack was later produced, still covered in fresh blood, while his own hand was also stained with it at the time of his arrest. At the inquest, it was heard that Mary Davies had been sober that morning, while her husband, although often known to be intoxicated in recent months, appeared calm during the events themselves, even as he'd earlier been begging her not to proceed with the case against him. There was no clear evidence of a struggle before the act itself, and no sign that the situation had escalated beyond the conversation that had taken place just beforehand. After leaving the testimony and medical evidence, the jury returned a verdict of wilful murder, and Matthew Davies was committed to take his trial at the next Warwick Assizes. Matthew Davies was hung on the 13th of April 1848, and that's right guys, I said hung. Reports at the time described the execution as swift, with the bolt withdrawn and the man without any apparent struggle, dropped and killed almost instantly. It was said in Warwick that few cases in the town had drawn as much attention as this one. Yet despite that interest, those who gathered to witness the execution showed little concern for his fate, and following his death, his body was buried within the confines of the jail. So rest in peace, Mary Davies.